Rachelle Wilhite, the designated broker of Best Choice Realty. And with me today, I've got Candace Frazier, Tara Peace. I also have Jenny Hook and Shannon Hall. All of us are here to support your efforts in your sales. And they are certainly welcome to jump in at any point in time, because I think you guys get asked these types of questions all the time from not only clients, but agents. I'm working with a seller. I'm working with a potential buyer who's going to sell their home and also buy another one. What improvements should they do to add value? And it just so happens that I have a client right now this weekend that asked me this exact question. So I built the slides tonight with Shannon's help, all about what improvements add value. And we're going to talk specifically about some of the top ones, kind of spark some interest, and you guys might have some questions after this. We'll open it up for Q&A at about 6 tonight, and then we'll just kind of go through the slides. There's only 4 or 5 slides tonight, so we'll provide for some interesting discussion. Let's go to the next slide. So painting. Painting. So this is a text message that we received back in 2022. I probably could replicate this text thread about a dozen times since 2022. And I know you've probably received this as well from your clients. And the Tinnies happen to be a painting company that we've used before. If the Tinnies can squeeze us in next week, would it be bring the price up a little? That's the seller or the potential buyer that was a seller as well. And this is our response. This is my response. I've never been disappointed in a fresh coat of paint. This is what you should say as well. Always is and will be the best return on your investment. I do not think you can go wrong with painting. I think that painting does help. It not only helps sell, but it also would help with the price a little. I liked how the client already in their own mind thought it was a little. So it's not going to give them $100,000 more, but it certainly would help. It would give them a return on their investment. So anything more to say on that, Candace or Shannon?
No, I totally agree. We had a great example this past week of a new listing from one of our agents, and that was the one thing they did. They went through and added the paint and, cleaned the carpets in the house, and she's seeing a great return. I mean, and she did a little staging, self-staging, but yeah, it's definitely paint goes a long way, interior and exterior, to be
Yes.
honest.
Yes, same thing on exterior as well. Definitely helps sell the house, but it certainly can help a little. Let's go with the
Yeah.
next slide.
Hey, Rachelle.
Yeah, Sean.
One thing, if money's a issue, I've learned that getting primer and adding color to it is a cheap way of paint.
The other thing that I didn't know, and I learned this, was I didn't know you could actually siding, that's like the vinyl siding, you actually can paint vinyl siding now. So if you don't like that color of the siding, and I had a house in Tacoma, I was like, wow, what a huge difference that made. Just having that vinyl siding painted can also give it a nice fresh look as well. So there are things that maybe your clients don't know, that just by giving them that piece of knowledge will help build more trust. And then when it's time for them to sell, even if it's a year from now, they will know that they can trust you because you're giving them some proper advice. So hopefully this helps you guys tonight. Let's go to the next slide. This one came up. I got a listing appointment next week with Shannon. We're going to go out and talk about solar panels, but we were talking about solar panels over a year ago. Here's the text message was on the left. Does it increase the home value to install solar panels? So my response is down below. I had to email because there was so much I had to say about this. I said, yes, as long as they are owned. There are solar panels that are not. Appraisers ask for the utility bills to understand the kilowatt hour rate, and they consider the cost approach. So they typically we don't see the adjustment factor greater than 10% of the home market value. So typically $10,000 to $30,000 is what I see on appraisals compared to one home with or without. So be sensible is what I told my client about the type of panels that you're going to install, and make sure you have the proper documentation, because when it comes to reselling, it's important to have that. And so I even attached Fannie Mae's appraising properties with solar panels, and that was very helpful. This particular individual is very much a numbers guy. He's an insurance broker, and so he obviously understands different parts of the house. He does home insurance. He insures a lot of properties for my clients. And so this would be an example of what I sent to somebody who asked a simple question: does it increase a home value to install solar panels? You want to be better than ChatGPT. You want to make sure you've done your research, and you also know how to provide value and source the type of things that you're finding. Don't just rely on what you Google. I don't think that's what the seller's looking for. They're looking for your professional advice, and something like that would be suitable to keep the discussions open.
Rachelle, also, if you have anybody who's gonna list a house or buy a house with solar panels, have them call me, because I've had a couple and there is some things they need to know about it for sure.
Yes. Yeah, and there are some that are not good as well. But then there's some great ones, depending on where you're going to put the solar panels and how you're going to structure it. Good.
Yeah, I know that I was talking with an agent recently about where the solar panels were placed. They're on the roof. Well, what's the condition of the roof as well? When you're talking about maintenance on that too. So something to keep in mind is the age of the roof when you're installing the solar panels.
Yeah,
And the liens are not transferable.
good to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're not transferable.
What's the case?
You said the liens are not transferable.
Correct. So if they get an energy efficient lien, for almost what 1%, 2% on a $50,000 solar panel, and then when they're selling the house, there's a $35,000 balance. That lien is not transferable to the new buyers. The new buyer would have to take out a private loan to pay for that lien, or you have to absorb it into the cost if there's room for it. But then
Right.
you have appraisal issues where they may not appraise it to cover all the panels.
Yeah.
Well,
So
Fannie Mae,
do
Fannie Mae
research,
puts
please.
that yeah, definitely want to print that Fannie Mae property, appraising properties with solar panels, because it explains that. It's very clear on what the lending guidelines will be on something like that.
Yeah.
But see, sellers don't hear that. They just see somebody, see something cool on YouTube or TikTok or something fun, and they're like, oh, I want to do that. And then there's obviously the aftermath of those decisions sometimes. Okay. Staging. So oftentimes I get asked, we've had a staging webinar that we've done, I think only a few months ago. I still am asked by sellers and by all of you out there whether staging will get you a return on my investment. Will the money that we spend in staging help? And so again, it really depends, would be my answer. But if you look at this, the top portion is coming from Architectural Digest. So many of you know Architectural Digest is an interior design magazine. It's very well known. It's been around a long, long time, probably longer than I've been alive. And they quote several articles. And I thought it was interesting to explain to you, when I'm doing my research to form a response to a client that I'm going to maintain for the life. I mean, I've worked with clients that I'm now on to like the third generation. I guess I've been around a long time, where they're buying and selling and then buying and having their kids or their grandkids buy from me. They're going to ask questions, and they're going to know that when I research a question that they have for me about their property value, I'm going to do a thorough job. So when I did this research just recently and for staging, I went to Architectural Digest because I subscribe to that. And they tell me that home staging is very desirable, and the data indicates that buyers are really going to be excited about staging. And they quote in the purple, that's highlighted on their website even. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? Where did they get that data from? I don't want ChatGPT to like give me the data. I want to know, where do they come up with that information, or what stats did they use? And so anytime you see like a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or cited on some sort of website or article, you're going to want to look to the footnotes. And in school, they told you to always go to the very end, and you'll find the footnotes of where they source that data from. So you'll notice that they source this data from National Association of Realtors. They did a study on the NAR back in 2024. Every year they do a staging profile. So they grab that data from that. They also got some information from Zillow, which again, I find very interesting that some of these companies are the authority of the data. So that's when I say staging, it really depends because of where the sources are coming from. I thought the article about 10 virtual staging statistics was pretty interesting. That's why you're starting to see some sellers opt to go more with virtual staging. Virtual staging has come around. It used to look very, very Mickey Mouse-like, meaning it's kind of, you can tell when somebody had virtually staged versus not. And now you see less and less of that. So I think there's a lot to be said about staging. And I think it really depends on who you're competing with, the property, the size, the price point. And we certainly have contacts in the staging arena that we trust. But we are currently dealing with a staging company right now that staged a property and then never actually staged the property, but took our money. So again, you want to make sure that the stagers are reputable, that you've built a relationship with them. If they're actually going to be bringing furniture in and you've paid money for that furniture, they're going to want to make sure that you vetted them correctly. Because even I am going through a little rough patch with one of my staging companies that we used to refer to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
So another question we get is roofs, and then we'll kind of show you some other things to consider. So roofs are something that you definitely want to step into because a lot of sellers, in fact, I have one seller right now who is waiting to put their home on the market until they find a home they're going to buy. But I know that I'm gonna have to deal and have this conversation with them because they seem to think that they don't have to do the roof, that they have this old roof and it's been fine for 25 years. And I'm probably closer to 30. I'd have to go back and look at when they bought the home, but they have been maintaining the roof meticulously. And I, for a fact, know just by looking at it that the granules are it's going to be rough to get even a 5-year roof certificate on it. So in that case, my advice should be these things that are on the screen here. I always advise that they get 3 bids, that they're done by a licensed, bonded, and insured contractor, and that they should keep the receipts and include in the seller disclosures, because every single time that I advise that the roof is done and done before we go on the market, or at least we get the bid so that I can negotiate that, every single time I'm able to have the right buyer and I'm able to get the terms that the seller desires. And every single time the seller tells me, oh my gosh, Rachelle, I'm so glad you got ahead of that. You didn't let this become a problem. I have enough knowledge, enough market knowledge about roofs and enough contractors, and I've been through many over the years, that is always my recommendation to get a roof. If it's in question, always get the 3 bids before you go on the market, just to make sure that you're dealing with something you can get a cert. And if not, you know how much it's going to cost for that particular contractor with that particular product to get it done. And that way I can set my price correctly so that I can get the right buyer. So we'll go into that in a minute. Somebody wrote to me and texted me just now and said, what's the return on investment of the roof? Let me show you where I would go to get that. So let's go to the next slide. So we have a very helpful insert or a sheet. It's a PDF. It's also in our seller guide that we use. And this is what I've put together based on a lot of the questions that we received. This is a helpful tip sheet that you would give potentially to say, I'm going to go out on an appointment and a seller is wanting to know what improvements add value to my property or to my house. This can sometimes just kind of give you those facts that will help them, guide them in the right direction on what they should spend money and do. So where is this located? bestchoicerealtyhomes.com. It is in our resource website. We have a lot of goodies in there. So oftentimes you don't know where to go or find it, but it is there. It is a PDF. If you do want it, I can send it to you, or Candace could send it to you, or Virginia could send it to you. But we've got the kitchen, bedroom, bath, all of these things, and roof would be very close to what you can get. It depends on what type of roof. You don't want to over improve the roof for the area or the neighborhood, but generally speaking, you're going to get the return on your investment. It's pretty much between 90 to 100% of the amount you spend in the roof, you will get it back once you actually do the roof. And that's, again, speaking of if it's the roof that's similar to the neighborhood, not that you've put on this expensive, roof, but just one that will match the rest of the neighborhood. That's what you can expect. So it is worth their time. It is a hassle, and depending on when you put the roof in, that's where it might be smart, and your client situation, when to have the roof work done. You certainly don't want to have the roof work done while you're on the market, but you do want to have an idea of what contractor, who's doing the work, and you've got that bid in hand and you're prepared to pay for that roof. And we've got one on I Street that my brother has, And same thing, we had a roofer come out and evaluate it, and it does look like it needs a new roof. So we're in the process of getting the bids supplied, and then we'll be putting it with the supplements. And the house is already on the market and getting a lot of attention right now, but I already know that that's going to come up on inspection. So we might as well get ahead of it and make sure that we factor that into our pricing and set the right expectation with the seller. Hopefully that answered that question. So if you could make that bigger, Shannon, if you could open it up from the resource website, that would be great. And we'll kind of go through how I would use this sheet. And then maybe Candace or Shannon could explain a little bit more on how they use this sheet, because I know I've used it personally and I love it. Because a lot of times sellers are not ready to go on the market right now. So the way I use the which improvements add value is if I know that the seller just wants to talk with me, wants to get to know what I'm all about, know about how I run my business, I know I'm not going to get the listing, so I'm not going to do a full-blown CMA, but I want to give them enough insight into what things they should do to their house to prepare it for sale. Then I would go ahead and grab this sheet, and you can get it right from our resource website. If you could just put it up so it's bigger, Shannon, that would be great. And we'll kind of go through it together, but I want to go through it with the seller. So I have a nice printed version for them. I put it in a folder, or I have it in a package, or it's in the seller guide. If you just want to talk about you and the company and talk about what we do to sell people's homes, it is in our seller guide. It is probably in the middle of the insert, but it's there for a reason. And when you're early on in the conversations of putting their house on the market, maybe they're not going to put the house on the market for another year. Still want to go out and meet with them. I'm going to go meet with somebody that's not going to be ready to put their house on the market for an entire year next week, because it's the solar panel guy and he's my insurance guy. He's the guy that I obviously want to make sure that I take good care of. And I'm going to probably have the sheet available. So they're going to ask questions about the kitchen. A lot of times they want to go have you walk through the house and they want to ask you about the kitchen and the bathroom. What you don't want to do as you're going through the property and giving them, you shouldn't do this or you should do this, you want to sit down, you just absorb it. Talk about the improvements that they've already done. And remember from last week, you want to acknowledge them that they selected some great features. Wow, I'm so glad you selected that quartz countertop. That's amazing that you got ahead of things. Wow, you must have been looking at the Architectural Digest magazine or looking at my magazine. Praise them for their decision-making in the upgrades that they've done. Make sure you do enough of that. Because when you start going through and saying, I would do this and I would do that, then they're thinking in their minds like, ooh, that's a lot. I don't know if I want to do all of that. And they could maybe go with another real estate agent they talk to. Most people will talk with about 5 different people before they make a decision on listing their home. And so what you don't want to do is give them so much negative information that they cramp and they do nothing. I think Tara said that last week really well. She didn't want to go with a listing agent that she had to interview for her home in Colorado because there was just like so much, and it just made her pretty frustrated, actually, because she had moving plans. So understand their timeline, understand when to give advice, but that sheet is very helpful in guiding somebody through it. So you don't have to be the one to bear bad news. You can give them a factual data sheet that tells them how much they would get and the return on their investment if they spent X or Y dollars in doing their kitchen or spending the time at doing some landscaping and things like that. It gives them some helpful hints. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight. Shannon, do you want to speak a little bit more about a few things you've run into? I know you've run into a few things with the carpet recently.
Well, I know that, like, I've had a client one time where we get where the proof is in the pudding, I suppose, is we're real estate agents. We know the market. We know what the comparables are. We know what our competition is on the market. And so I had one client that had, they wanted to list their house, their time frame, they wanted to move out east. So, I mean, for them, they needed to get on the market quickly. And so they had hem-hawed around, should we get new vinyl in the kitchen? They had vinyl flooring that was green. It was like, imagine forest green floors, like from circa 80s, 90s, basically, that had never been replaced. And so they were hem-hawing about it. And should we do it? Should we do it? And they also had a bunch of other things that they wanted to do to the house too. And so at some point it's like, okay, what can fit within the time frame? For them, it was actually going to make more sense to do the painting knowing that the new homeowner was going to come in and renovate the kitchen. I mean, that's the reality. It was going to be more than just flooring for the new person that was going to come in. So for them, they just needed the confidence of me saying, no, focus on the painting first. And we'll see what the feedback is over the first couple weeks. And if we need to go that direction, then we can have a conversation about it. But I think right now, no, because the new homeowner is going to come in and replace the flooring themselves. They might want to pick a different color than you pick,
Right.
something like that. So that's something that comes up from time to time. Candace, I think we were talking about carpets recently too, or at least
We're talking about
yeah.
carpets. I
Yeah.
just recently had one where we've gone through, we've looked at comparables. They are getting their house on the market before the end of this month, and the call came in shortly thereafter because they have a range and likely, and I've been sending them actual properties that are hitting the market and when they sell or go under contract. And so he's starting to see this trend of what's selling faster than others. And so he called me and said, I'm thinking if we spend another $10,000, it looks like based on what's happening in the market that we might be able to get more for the house. And so potentially, what are you thinking though? What are your thoughts? Because I know for a fact, kitchen, bathroom, two number one, and $10,000, is that going to work for a kitchen and bathroom update? Or do we go with like just the curb appeal and freshen up the paint in the house, do some trim on the exterior of the house, landscape the yard, those sort of things. So I think, my process is always giving them options, kind of like you said, Rachelle, not specifically saying do this, do this, do this, do this, but giving them options based on, kind of what they have the ability to do.
That's great. That's awesome. So I think the topic comes from Shannon. We have had an instance, and there's been a few actually. This is why I want to talk about this tonight, where we have a contract for a reason. So what I don't want to have you guys do, and I fail to remember, this is probably the highlight of the entire webinar, is I don't want you telling somebody, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can get $100,000, $150,000. I am in the process of putting out a big fire that that is out there right now because there was some emails or text messages that were exchanged between one of our agents and a seller. And so then what happens is some things are kind of outside your control. What happens if, say, 3 months from now, the market does a little dipsy doodle and goes down? Then that quartz countertop that you praised them about and that you suggested that they do, all of a sudden is not worth that. And it has nothing to do with their decision to make that quartz countertop decision. It has everything to do with the marketplace. And I have been in marketplaces that are like that. So I want you to be cautious in what you say and what you promise. Certainly you can give them a fact sheet because that fact sheet is pretty general. It tells on 80 to 110% or 90. I mean, that gives them some frame of reference, but it doesn't clearly state in writing, if you do this punch list of all of these items that I'm suggesting when my walkthrough, that will get you $150,000 more. That is not the case. So I want to be very, very clear about that. You want to be, when you're talking with sellers, be careful how you frame that. And I don't care if it's in a text message or if it's in an email or if it's verbal, it still is something that you need to be very careful on how you approach. Did I speak my mind clear enough on that? Virginia, Candace, Shannon,
Yeah.
Tara?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to our scenario too that we had painting. I mean, we could have said you'll get, full value. Absolutely, you'll get more money if you do the painting. But the response, as I'm sure you guys saw on the screen, was very carefully worded, where I've never been unhappy about a fresh coat of paint. Maybe it's not necessarily the value, but maybe it's the interest in the property. At the end of the day, price is just a part of the consideration.
I often say when clients talk to me, sellers specifically ask me about what they should do, like if they should go ahead and buy new carpet. And I always recommend getting the carpet clean and stretched before they buy new carpet. But I always tell it could make it more marketable. I use that term all the time. This could make it more marketable.
Good.
But because you just don't know. I mean, what we think adds value often doesn't add value in the general scheme of life.
And if, as we know, some of us have worked through some of those times, it could be nothing you've done. It could be everything having to do with, 5 houses on the same street went on the market, and you overinflated what is possible. And I've done that before. So don't make that mistake. I learned hard lessons early on in my real estate career, and I hope to teach you guys not to do those things. But you could save me a lot of time and hassle by properly communicating value when you're discussing these matters. And it's
Yeah.
important when they trust you. I mean, when Virginia or Tara or Shannon or Candace go out on a listing appointment and they know that you're working with best choice, you want to make sure you set the proper expectations. That's great. And then yes, there's a top, maybe you get bonus points tonight. If you can tell me, what is the appraisal where you overdo something for the neighborhood? There is a word for that. Help me out. It's Monday. What is the word? Like we gotta play Jeopardy here at the end. What is the word where if you over improved the house for the area? That's what we don't want to do. Is it substitution? Somebody's chat GPT and you know it.
I'm just Googling, I'm not chat GPT.
I was actually trying to look at a text
Yeah,
message for a client that I was telling her, I said, your
Real
house
estate
is at the
appraisal.
top of the market. Like, you don't need to do any more improvements.
What is the term? And those of
It
you on the
says
call, should go ahead and
super
put in the chat.
adequacy is defined as excess in capacity or quality of structure. It's called super adequacy. I've never heard this term.
There's another term too. It's in
Okay,
the-
good, because I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't make sense.
Let's see here.
Help me out. Some of you that is new to the business, you probably learned about this in pre-licensing as well, because it's in the appraisal chapter.
Oh, functional obsolescence.
There you go. That's what I was looking for. Functional obsolescence. Okay, so we have our vocab word for the week. We're trying to we don't over improve the properties for the area. Again, we're looking to just make it easy for the sellers, and let's not do that. So how do you do that? You just make sure you tour the properties that are in competition or that are on the same street, and make sure you don't suggest things that are outside the norm. It becomes difficult when you start to do that. Let's not make it harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, I think we've come across some of these properties too, where it's like, they're in this neighborhood and the builder would have done X, but then they just did all of these upgrades to the house. They added the triple pane windows, they have the Trex decking, they've got the I don't know, the green, the fake grass basically that they put in the front. And it's just like all these things. Does the neighborhood support that value?
I have a cute story.
Yeah.
The seller that I just closed on today, when the appraiser came, she put a list of everything she had done with the prices that she had paid for it. So what it cost her, and she made a list for the appraiser, and she goes, the appraiser loved my house. And we've been fighting back, well, not fighting, but kind of, I was like, really, she came in way higher than I hoped she would as a listing. And I was very pleased that we got an offer where we got it and just a little bit under asking. And the appraisal came back short, and she was like, what? I told her everything I did. I said, I know, but what you did for you does not often equate to what the appraisal's going to come out as.
Yep.
So
It is probably on the lower side on certain aspects of our tear
Yeah.
sheet, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
Virginia, that's great. Great illustration of our point tonight. Any questions that we had from the group here tonight? Hopefully that was helpful. Just an open discussion about what improvements add value. Any other questions or comments tonight? Oh, quiet.
I know Colette, I want to give a little praise to Colette because I know she's been working on a fabulous listing, and this definitely came into play because I think prior to some of the items that she suggested the seller do and doing on that property, it probably would have listed at the price point that it's at. So Good job on the work and effort you did. Colette, not to take from anybody else that has, but we just had a conversation about this morning, so.
Okay. All right, I think we're good for the day. Have a great 4th of July. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on, and we'll talk to you next Monday.